Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Chatting with the Lightkeeper. As always, I am Edward, and you are you. First of all, thank you for listening. I am very glad and happy that you are here. And next, it is finally March. We've made it to March. Now, the saying in my neck of the woods is March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb. And as I look out the window in front of me as I'm recording this, the lion is roaring, snow is coming down. We'll find out how good my microphone is at noise cancellation as my neighbor is currently blowing snow. So, with that said, let's just jump right in. If you follow me over on Instagram, lately I've had a couple of posts about collars and collaring. We talk about some of the symbolism, what they mean, the different types, day collars, play collars, permanent collars, stages of collaring. And I don't want to make it sound wrong or inaccurate because it's not. If it's for you, that is fantastic. But there is sort of a tradition that existed for years and years on the progression of collaring. Talk about that over on Instagram in a couple of those posts. But there's one type of collar that I avoided intentionally to talk about in those posts because I wanted to share it here in a podcast. And so the collar we're going to talk about today on the pod is self-collaring or a self-collar. And what this really is a submissive who is going out and placing a collar on themselves. Now, it doesn't actually mean that they have to formally, put a collar around their neck or wear an anklet or whatever it is that symbolizes it. Some can, some do. But self-collaring is really the submissive deciding to take ownership of themselves without a dominant. They are living and receiving a collar for themselves. Now, this concept is not entirely new. It has been around for quite a while, but it has become much more visible in recent years, especially online. You see it talked about more and more in online spaces, and it is basically a submissive that is unpartnered, and they are using the collar sort of as a motivational tool to achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve in life, but making a commitment to themselves to do this without necessarily needing a dominant. So, why do people choose to do the self collar? Um, for some, it is just an affirmation of their identity. That being submissive is not something that simply disappears. They're not currently, in a dynamic. They don't have a dominant. They don't have a kinkastic partner. And self-collaring is acknowledging that submission is a core part of who they are, and it is independent of being in any type of relationship, partnership, or dynamic. Another place where people choose to do self-collaring is sort of as part of a healing and transitional part of a journey. Sort of it's a bridge after a relationship has ended, especially a DS relationship. It can be, well, it's hard. It really is, especially if it was a deep connection, and most lifestyle relationships are. So sometimes it feels even harder than a traditional vanilla relationship ending. But not always. Obviously, everyone's different. Every relationship termination is unique. But some submissives use it during that period of healing transition. They use it to stay committed to themselves while they heal and use it as a tool to work on themselves while they journey and get ready for what is next in their life. Another area is simply self ownership. It is literally taking ownership of oneself and committing themselves to perhaps its personal growth. They have some things that they want to achieve, and they are going to use the structure of DS to achieve that without necessarily having the dominant partner. That self-collaring is going to serve as a constant reminder, especially if they are wearing a piece of jewelry or somehow doing the thing that, is a constant reminder that they are on the journey of personal growth. Other people, part of the self ownership is self care. Let's face it, we are often our own worst enemies at taking care of ourselves. And so sometimes self collaring can be a way to remind or enforce, if you will, that we need to do a better job of doing care or even self love, that we don't need to have a partner to love ourselves, that we should be loving ourselves as we are, independent of having a partner. Another area where people will self-collar is it gives them, a sense of structure that they've designed for themselves without a partner, and it's sort of a tangible reminder of their value. And finally, it is also something that can be very empowering, sort of saying, I am worth the care, the commitment, and the devotion to myself that this collar represents. And it's a profoundly personal and powerful statement. So those are the main reasons why people choose to self-collar. Of course, there are other reasons out there for it. All are fantastic. But basically, it's a motivational, personal, and sort of the philosophy that has grown up behind this is really the a philosophy based on self-ownership. Once again, we're applying that BDSM structure, the discipline, and the care that a good dominant would provide to a submissive, but the submissive is doing that for themselves. They are stepping up, I guess, if you will, and I don't think that's the right word. And I do apologize. They're not stepping up. They are just basically taking ownership of it and applying the discipline and the structure that they love about BDSM and using it to empower themselves until they find a partner if they want to find a partner. It can be setting routines, be setting rules, or even standards for yourself in the way that would happen in a DS relationship, but without the relationship. You're just sort of using this to do all those wonderful things that DS brings, but doing it all on yourself, all by yourself. And really, it's a great reminder that nobody bears the responsibility for ourselves and our own well-being. That's something we have to do ourselves. Yes, a partner or partners can definitely be helpful. They can inspire us, they can lead us, they can do all these wonderful things, but our own well-being comes down to the choices we make ourselves. So self-coloring also is something that helps prepare someone for a future relation. They're putting in the work to make themselves a better person. So when they are ready to enter into a relationship, they have used self-coloring as a tool to help them do the work to prepare for that next relationship. Now, it sounds great and it's wonderful. I think it's a wonderful thing. But of course, in the greater BDSM community, there is some controversy about this. There friction kind of because there are people who believe that collaring is something that has to happen between a dominant and submissive, and that adding the self-collaring into this changes wearing and collars and their meaning from something that was strictly relationship based into something that it was never designed to be. So you get pushback sometimes from who say self-collaring is not right because it's diminishing the traditional value of what a collar or what a collar represents. And this is often because in BDSM circles, a collar often gets compared to the level of commitment of a wedding ring. So a critic of this will often say that, no one marries themselves. You don't put a wedding ring on your own finger because marriage is inherently relational. You have to have some sort of relationship with another person or people to marry. And that I completely disagree with because BDSM is a very individualistic journey, and how we choose to make and walk our path in it is unique. And well, yes, some may feel that this is diminishing the value of a collar or putting meaning onto collars that was never intended. It is not something that I I believe it. I think self-coloring is a wonderful empowerment tool. And of course, sort of very related, but also part of the criticism that happens sometimes is that people see DS, especially as a structure that requires being in a relationship. There are those who say that, a submissive without a dominant is complete, or a dominant without a submissive is incomplete. That if you identify as DS, if you are unpartnered, you are not a person. Now, that's something that I disagree with. I think we can all be complete and amazing people. In fact, my own belief is that we have to be as complete or the best version of ourselves that we can be to effectively enter a relationship. Before that happens, if we go into a relationship and we're not ready for it, it is going to possibly not work or cause problems that we're going to have to work through as the relationship goes on. And I don't see DS being framed as something where one must be partnered to embrace DS fully and completely. So there's that. And the other criticism is, it's very similar. I mean, it's sort of diluting, I guess, the value of a collar. It's diluting the value of DS, sort of taking it away from the core principles that have existed. And I see this just as pushback from people who are very traditional in how they look at the lifestyle. And I'm not saying traditionalism is wrong, not at all. But the lifestyle is constantly evolving, constantly changing. And we need to be accepting, even if something isn't what we think would work for us or isn't for us. We need to embrace those people who do choose to walk a path that might be different from our own. So those are the main challenges, and basically it revolves around the evolution of the lifestyle and those who are feeling that these changes are somehow lessening the importance of collars. And what it gets down to, in my eyes, is it's not lessening, it's not cheapening, it's not away from the beauty and the connection and commitment that we see in traditional collaring, where it's between partners, but it's taking all of those values and applying them and using them to empower yourself individually. Now, there are a few things that self-coloring is not. It is not the Miss Congeniality Prize or Mr. Congeniality Prize of BDSM. It's not the consolation prize. It's not a placeholder until the right dominant comes along. Um, it doesn't mean that somebody is unowned in BDSM terms. In a diminished sense, it is not less valid or less meaningful than a collar reached from another person. It doesn't mean that while you're self-collared, you are closing yourself off to a future relationship. It doesn't mean that you're not keeping an eye open for an amazing partner. It is just a tool to empower a person. And so none of those things are true about self-collaring. And self-collaring is an act that really, like, rituals are often a part of DS relation. And self-collaring, a lot of people who do it use it also as a tool to keep or to empower themselves through rituals that they find are helpful to them. It might have been something that they really loved in a past relationship or really want in a future relationship, and bringing that into their lives and using their structure of DS to empower them to do it. For example, journaling, writing in a journal is something that can be very therapeutic, and many dominants have their submissive keep a journal, maybe even providing journal prompts, or they both journal with the same prompt for a week or 2 weeks, and then sit down and discuss what each other has written in their journal about it. Um, Another area where the ritual sort of into it is setting goals, setting structure, creating that, if you will, rules that you enforce yourself, not rules or structure that are jointly crafted between dominant and submissive, but the submissive is creating their own structure to help them grow as a person. And the collar is the symbolism of this personal empowerment journey. And it's a psychological thing, but it's this little psychological thing that really, really helps reinforce the commitment that the person is making to being their best selves and using the structure of DS to get there. So self-coloring really is not a radical act or something that's cringe, but it's really actually a radical act of self-respect for somebody who is single and wanting to empower themselves. So I guess that would be the takeaway I would like you to have is that when somebody self-collars, it is not an act of radical or pushing some fringe, cringe DS theory, but it's an act of actual radical self-respect and empowerment. And also, I will add, sometimes you will see, and I know submissives who are active in in-person events and things, while they don't consider themselves self-collared per se, they will wear the collar to lifestyle events, from munches to play parties, etc. And the reason they do this is the collar is sort of a buffer. Let's face it, in any community, online or in person, there are a certain amount of dominance that people will come across that are actively looking for a partner and are sort of using events as a singles mingle. Now, I'm not saying that's bad. In fact, my local community has a munch group, or used to. I haven't looked in forever, but they used to have, and I would imagine probably still do have a somewhat vetted munch group for people who are single and looking to mingle. But scholars do in those types of settings help weed out or help a submissive weed out those who are sort of hungry in their seeking. I guess that would be a good way to say it. The collar can serve as a little buffer. Somebody who is actively using the events or chat rooms or discussion groups to find somebody will see that, maybe they're wearing a collar, the submissive, so they're going to instantly assume they're in a relationship and move on. Whereas now it's empowering the submissive because they're wearing the collar. The super seekers are not are choosing to not interact with them. So they are actually to know people who legitimately want to get to know them. And out of that, if there's an interest, they can sort of let it slip that the collar is a self collar and they're not in a relationship, they're not in a dynamic. And then things can progress from there. But it's sort of a little layer of protection, if you will, from the super seekers that are out there. So overall, I think self-coloring is a wonderful, empowering way that a submissive can use the structure, the power of DS to use it to grow as a person. And with that, I think it is a wonderful, wonderful thing to consider if you are single and looking to continue to grow as a person, and the structure of DS helps you do that. It's a great tool to have it. But I'm curious, what do you think about self-collars? Do you think they're something that would help you, or do you think that they are something that, even if you don't agree, do you think it just detracts from the meaning of collaring as being a relationship-based thing? So drop a comment in and let me know what you think. I'm really curious to hear your opinion. And as always, if you could do me a favor, if you could tap the like button, the follow button, subscribe button, all depending on whatever platform you are listening to this podcast on, that would be super amazing. I would really appreciate it. And with that, I want to wish everyone a fantastic beginning of the month of March, and I look forward to chatting with you again in just a couple of weeks.